Jay Bayona, you directed the first two episodes of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. I know you reread the books again when you started working on the series. So what ideas did you glean from that reread?
To me, I think it was important because I read the books when I was a kid. And then I read them again when I was 14, 15. It's very interesting how you get different things depending on the age you read them. That tells you how rich are the books, But coming from there, to me, it was a way of going back to the spirit, trying to be faithful and discovering how was the writing in order to put that on the screen,
Mm-hmm. I mean, you really have to set the tone for the whole series and its IP that millions of people are familiar with between the books and the films, but we're also getting the Second Age, which hasn't been portrayed in media yet. So what was the pre-production like, and just creating these worlds from scratch that we haven't seen yet?
Yeah, to me, I was very impressed about the ambition of the show because I got there. It was probably no more than 9-10 months before we started to shoot. And that time we had to create all these worlds from scratch. As you said, it was a Second Age. So it was a time that never had seen, that we haven't seen before on the screen. And it was like 4 different kingdoms, lots of characters. You have to do all the auditions, all the castings, and we have very few time. We have like less than 10 months. So it was a huge amount of time. To me, it was important not only to be faithful to the writing, and that was on the script. I mean, I really love the scripts, and I saw the love and the care that Patrick and JD, the showrunners, had for Tolkien. It's also the fact that it's a very visual storytelling when you read Tolkien. And in that sense, I was very obsessed in trying to capture that, trying to fit that kind of storytelling into a television format, and that took us we have very few time to do that. But I had a great team. I have a very great costume designer, a great production designer, great cinematographer. So I was surrounded by very talented people that did my work a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. You did use a lot of gorgeous, vast landscapes, kind of to, I feel like, to convey the epicness of these places before we get an up close of the characters. So what was it like just composing those shots when you're situating the viewer in new worlds?
Yeah, well, it was always go back to the books and see how the landscape reflects the character, the mood of the story and the characters. And I remember that one of the exercises that I did is I sat down with a couple of artists and I did like one pass on the script. Every single scene, we created like a visual image that will make that scene specific, and in that sense, I remember that we have a room full of all those images, and from there we had a reading of the story that was a visual reading. I was very obsessed in trying to capture that beautiful storytelling that you can find in the books. It's not only about the depth of the characters and the poetry, it's also about the visuals, and the importance of the landscape, nature, all these elements that we try to capture in every single scene with very specific images.
Mm-hmm. What kind of inspirations did you guys use for each world? Because I know that you guys use a lot of nature for the Harfoots, and then a lot of paintings and artwork for the elves. So what do you guys look to?
Yeah, I mean, every single kingdom had to be specific, and we definitely work was about finding what makes so special and different from the other kingdoms, every single kingdom. So nature is always like a great inspiration in Tolkien. And I remember that I always try to bring a sense of reality to the fantasy. For example, I remember with the elves, in general, we have a sense of elevated nature. That's something that you can find not only in Tolkien, but in fantasy. So it's rooted in reality, but there is a sense of being more sophisticated. I remember that for the elf, for example, because they are so related to the forest and to nature. I'm from Barcelona, and of course I thought about Gaudí and the architecture. And I remember I mentioned Ramsey Avery, the production designer, and Kate Hawley, the costume designer, the interiors of the Sagrada Familia. And from there, we took the idea of creating Lindon, the kingdom of the elves, as forests that look like a cathedral, you know? So you're coming always from Tolkien, trying to capture the philosophy of his work, and then from your own experience of things, paintings that you remember. I remember that, of course, for dwarves, for example, I remember Eisenstein movies, Russian movies from Eisenstein, this kind of aesthetics of silent cinema from the Russian period, you know, that was a lot of fun, you know, like going back through all those references and try to somehow blend your memories from the books with your own memories from lots of different things.
Mm-hmm. This is I always find it like interesting when we get prequels to things, because the viewer, we already know what the end is, right? Like we've seen the Third Age, or we've read about it. So what is it like creating a prequel and knowing what the end result is, and you're just showing how we're getting there and embedding the prequel with enough details that the viewer can see how we get there eventually in the Third Age when it's decay and declining?
Well, we had an end. I mean, we knew how it was going to end, all those locations, all those characters. So we had to go back to the origins and try to understand what was Galadriel at that time. You know, she's a very different character from the Third Age. She's not a woman sitting on a throne in a court. She's more a more reliable character. Somehow she feels more human because she's a woman in action that commits mistakes, and in that sense, it's very exciting. You know, like knowing where you're going. You go back to the origin and try to understand, try to look for something that feels consistent with the direction you're going. I think in that sense, I really like the idea behind the show. When I first talked with Patrick and JD, and they mentioned that the story was based on the appendix, so we knew what were the great points in the story, and we were filling the gaps. So we had a direction, and we had at the same time freedom to interpret the story and bring something new to what we already know.
Mm-hmm, sure. You directed several scenes in the Sundering Seas. Can you talk about that process? Like, I'm assuming you guys were in a water tank, but what was that like using practical effects versus visual?
Yeah, to me, the most difficult thing was to feed all those big sequences into a television schedule, because at the end, you are doing television. And I remember that, for example, for the water tank sequences, I was lucky that before doing the Lord of the Rings, I was the director of The Impossible. That was a big movie shot in a water tank. So I had the experience. I know how slow it was, but I knew how to do it. So that gave me the experience in order to face this work. You know, at the end, you know that it's a very slow process to shoot all those sequences. They are always very slow. But if you know what you want and you're very specific, there is a way of fitting that into the schedule always.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Well, Jay, it's great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. We'll see back in a little bit.